Alright, so with the release of Yoimiya's banner, I felt like I should make a video on her because it's her first rerun and some people probably want to know if she's good or not. But I didn't want to just make some normal guide because I feel like that'd be kind of lame and boring. So instead, I'm going to be talking about every single bow character and ranking them and how good I personally think they are. Before I got into the video though, I did make a Discord server that I'll most likely be joining a lot, so the link is going to be in the description if you want to join. I'm also going to start streaming when Sumer comes out, so there'll be more info on that there. And I'm also a bit sick, so if I sound a little stuffy, then yeah, there's that. But anyway, let's talk about the first bow character. And if we're going by alphabetical order, then Aloy would be the first one. Now, if I'm going to be honest, she actually isn't that terrible of a character that most players would think. She's sort of a support DPS that you'll most likely use to buff your other party members, and she does have a pretty good kit for some decent cryo application and has a lot of good constellations. Aside from all that though, she actually does have a talent which sort of makes her a little better for supporting the team rather than someone like Amber, who we'll talk about next. When you use your elemental skill, you throw out this bomb that leaves out tiny bombs on the ground after the first explosion. When any of them hit an enemy, Aloy gains a stack of coil, and when you get 4 stacks, you get the rushing ice effect, which infuses your normal attacks with cryo and increases your normal attack damage. If you have a level 40 talent though, anytime you get a stack of coil, her own attack is increased by 16%, while the other members in your party get an 8% attack increase. And then you can run her as a support for your team, which looks to be pretty good in my opinion, or you can run her as a burst DPS who can be using 4-piece noblesse pretty comfortably because of her low burst cost and 12-second cooldown. Before writing this though, I actually didn't even know what her kit did, so I was kind of surprised that it wasn't that bad. I'm going to be putting Aloy in D tier though because, well, yes, she does have a decent kit with some good support abilities, but it kind of gets outshined, in my opinion at least, by someone like Rosaria or even Kaya, who's a free character. Alright, now one really good character after another. We're on Amber. Now, despite being clowned on by like 99% of everyone that plays Genshin, she actually has some pretty good pyro application and a pretty good support kit. Her ult has a burst cost of 40, which is the lowest in the game, and a 12-second cooldown like Aloy. So 4-piece noblesse again is going to be pretty good on her, but if you're running her in a melt comp, 4-piece instructor might actually be better because it increases all the party members' EM by 120 for 8 seconds. Her best weapon would be Elegy the End, which would make your Amber an even better support with the ER substat and giving your party members 100 EM along with 20% attack at R1. All in all though, Amber is actually a decent character and flexible for some pyro reaction teams, but again, did that really convince you to play her? I'm going to be putting her in C tier because she's good for that one scenario, but in like any other team, she's not really the best. Alright, now we have the bartender at Cat's Tail, Diona. First off, she has a pretty strong shield when invested into, along with an ult that heals the team. She's a pretty good cryo battery for some freeze teams and has some really good constellations like increasing her shield strength and at C6 buffing all party members EM by 200 when she ults. Now, if we're talking about a freeze team, then having EM is virtually useless, but if you run Diona on something like a melt team, it's actually not that bad. Weapons wise, you can run Favonia's Warbow, which gives a shit ton of ER, but the passive would be pretty hard to reliably hit because you're going to be running all HP pieces on her. If you replace the HP circlet with something like a crit rate circlet to proc the passive, then yes, it'll be pretty good for team energy, but at the cost of having lower healing and a weaker shield. Okay, editing Seiun here. For some reason, I never said what weapon I think would be the best for Diona, and that is Sacrificial Bow. Like every sac weapon, whenever you hit an enemy with your elemental skill, it has a chance to reset its cooldown, and since Diona's elemental skill tracks the enemy, you can kind of hit it every time if you have it refined enough. So yeah, I think sac bow is her best weapon, and onto the video. Apart from weapons though, since she is a support, you can theoretically run her with 4-piece noblesse, but since her burst cost is 80 with a 20-second cooldown, it might not be that good. Personally, I just use her as a healer with 2-piece tenacity and 2-piece emblem, but like, to each their own. I'm going to be putting Diona at A tier because she's a very useful character having a shield and healing, so yeah, I think she's pretty good. Alright, now in my opinion, Fischl is one of, if not the best off-field sub-DPS character in the game. First off, she has access to the 4-piece tenacity set, increasing all parties' attack and shield strength by 20% every 3 seconds when an elemental skill hits an opponent. Since Fischl's elemental skill just places down Oz and acts like a turret, the entire duration of her skill has 100% uptime on the tenacity 4-piece. Since she's also a bow user, you can run her on Favonia's Warbow, generating even more energy for the other party members. But if I'm going to be honest, having her in a party with one other Electro character is enough for me to get her ult pretty quick. The Stringless is also a really good option for her in Taser teams with the EM substat and the passive increasing Oz's damage and her burst damage. Now, her elemental skill has a 25-second cooldown with a 10-second uptime, so on paper she has a 15-second downtime for the 4-piece tenacity set. The thing is, if you ult and then either swap off or let the duration end, Oz will be put back on field, which resets the duration and still procs the 4-piece tenacity set. Again though, Fischl to me is one of the best off-field sub-DPS characters, especially in a Taser team, and has a lot of flexibilities for a lot of other teams as well. Surprisingly, I'm going to be putting Fischl in S tier because, like I said earlier, in my opinion, she's one of the best sub-DPS characters, and yeah. Alright, now we're on to Ganyu. Regarded as one of the best DPSs in the game, she's a really good character for melt and freeze teams, but there are a couple downsides on why I don't personally like playing her that much. Alright, first up, Ganyu in a melt team is nothing short of insane. My Ganyu is at C0 with an R1 prototype crescent and kills PMA in like a couple of seconds. I mean, it is a standing still target with like negative resistance to every element, but she still outputs a lot of damage. She's cryo, so like I said earlier, she can also be put in a freeze team, which in my opinion isn't as good as something like an Ayaka freeze team, but is still one of the better ones. She's a really flexible unit with some of her best weapons being 4-star craftable ones, but let me talk about some of her downsides. First off, charging up her bow twice can get really annoying to do constantly and requires a shield most of the time, and especially when you're fighting a boss. Since it does take a while to charge up, if the boss is about to hit you right before you can get your Frost Flake arrow up, you either get stunned or you have to iframe it, which would mean you have to charge it up again. All in all though, Ganyu is one of the best DPS in the game given the scenario and can be really good for free-to-play characters. I'm going to put Ganyu in the lower end of S tier because most of her best teams have a lot of characters that some people might not have and require a lot of investment. Alright, I'm gonna keep this short. Outside of an Ito, Noel, or I guess a Ningguang team, Goro is kinda useless. I mean, he does give a defense buff and a 15% geo damage bonus to all party members, but since he's so specific, he can't be used outside of having 3 geo characters in one party. As a character on a geo team though, he's a really good support and has some really good constellations for buffing geo damage and can even heal while his ult is active. Also, since he is a support, you can also run him on Favonia's Warbow, which will funnel even more particles to your other party members, but like, you're gonna have 2 other geo characters in your party, so I think energy is kind of whatever. In conclusion though, Goro is a character that you need to run on any Geo team with 2 other Geo characters, which doesn't make him bad, it just makes him really specific. So I'm actually going to make an entire new tier for him because like, he's not bad, he's just, I don't know, man. Okay, now, Sara is a little like Goro in that she's really good on Electro teams and kinda mid on other teams, but let me explain. So, unlike Goro, she does give a buff to anyone on the team regardless of element, but if we're talking about C6, then that's kind of a different story. Sarah's C6 only works on characters that deal Electro damage, but I know getting her C6 isn't really that common, but I just wanted to bring it up. But onto her buff. Her buff works by using her skill, charge attacking the ground, or hitting the enemy, and then explodes after a short time, buffing the character that's on the field. Her ult also gives the same attack buff and is also kind of the same thing, exploding after a short time and only buffing the character on field. The difference with her and someone like Bennett is that since she doesn't have any other effect like healing or something like that, you build her DPS most of the time. One of her best sets is also 4-piece Noblesse for buffing the team even more, so she's probably going to be doing a shit ton of damage with her burst. If you already have a member in your party with 4-piece Noblesse though, you can run her with 4-piece Emblem as well and have her just like a burst DPS while your other party members are building up their ults again. But I should mention with Noblesse, since her burst cost is 80 with a 20-second cooldown, it might be hard to even get her ult back up, especially if you're not running on an Electro team. I'm going to put Sarah at B tier because she does have a pretty strong attack buff and is a pretty easy character to build, but the reason she's B is because she does have a pretty weird kit to play around, and with C6 is very team specific. But apart from that, she's a pretty good attack buffer if you don't have one and is really easy to build. Alright, now we're on to Tartaglia, or what everyone that plays Genshin calls him, Child. Now, before I got Ayato, I main Child, so I might be a little biased, but regardless, Child's one of, if not the best Hydro applier for AoE and single target scenarios. You might know the international team with Child, Bennett, Zhongling, and Kazuo being one of the best teams in the game, with Child as the on-field Hydro applier, enabling Zhongling to vape every hit and deal a shit ton of damage. Now, Child in an international team, or whatever, is already known by like every player, but Child in a freeze team is also extremely fun. Especially in the new event, Child just riptides every enemy and makes a bunch of numbers on the screen, which is really satisfying. Child's burst can also be a huge nuke if you do it right. Like in an international team, your Zhongling goes pyro, 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 and then your Child goes boom, 200k. I mean, I did say earlier, I am sort of biased, and I love my Child, but in my opinion, he's a character that everyone should have, and one that's just so fun to play, and really good in a lot of teams. Now, after I say all that, you might be a little surprised that I'm going to put Child in the lower end of S tier under Ganyu, because he is a really good character for AoE situations and is the main Hydro applier on some of the best teams in the game, but that's really all he is. Kokodai. Alright, Venti. Now, Venti has been out since day 1, and honestly, he's still one of the best characters in the game. He has some of the best grouping you can get, along with having access to the Verdescent Veneer 4-piece, making him one of the best support characters. Tapping his elemental skill launches opponents in the air while dealing animo damage, and holding it down does the same thing but creates a wind funnel, letting you glide in the air. Good for exploration, but I would really never use it in Spiral. His elemental burst is just a black hole, sucking in enemies and dealing a shit ton of ammo damage. If you also infuse his ult with an element, it'll do even more damage and gives 15 energy to all the party members with the corresponding element. If I'm gonna be honest though, playing Venti on my friend's account, due to his really simple kit, he does seem kinda dated, but at the same time he's gonna be your best characters when you need to group a bunch of squishy enemies. One of the things I don't like about Venti is that depending on the characters on your team, you might not be able to hit the enemies that are sucked in by his burst because he kinda like holds them in the air. All in all though, there's not much I can say about him because he's a pretty old character with a really simple kit. But because of all that, I'm going to be putting him in the middle of S tier because, like I said, he's really good for AoE situations and is just overall a great character to have in a party. Alright, now Yelan. I pulled for her and I really like her, but she's not someone that anyone really necessarily needs. If you just need a Hydro applier, then Xingqiu will sort of do the exact same thing while giving your team a lot more utility, but we're talking about Yelan here. Her elemental skill lets her sort of phase through enemies, tangling them up in her lifeline and deals Hydro damage when her skill ends. Her ult makes this little cute dice float around her, which does a joint attack whenever the active character does a normal attack. Now, like I said earlier, she doesn't have utility like interruption resistance or healing like her 4-star counterpart, but since she is a 5-star character, she does have a higher scaling with a talent that increases the damage dealt of the active character when her ult is active. One of her best weapons is Stringless, increasing her elemental skill and burst damage, but if you don't have that one, then Recurve Bow isn't that bad considering it's a 3-star weapon you get from chests. But since she does have a 4-star counterpart that is a little easier to build and play, I'm going to be putting her in the higher end of A tier. Now, the final bow character, who's it gonna be? It's almost like this entire video was centered around this one person. It's Yoimiya. It's the person, it's the person who's out right now. Yoimiya is actually a really good pyro DPS, albeit with some flaws. Like, sometimes her auto-targeting is ass and is really bad with multi-target scenarios. But aside from all that, she's a really easy character to build and play. I mean, this video is about bow characters, so it's no surprise when I say that she's ranged, which is really good because in some scenarios of Spiral, having a bow character that doesn't really need to stay near the enemy can be really good. But let's talk about her kit. Her main source of damage is her elemental skill, which infuses her normal attacks with pyro and deals a shit ton of damage. Her burst makes her jump into the air and shoots down a firework marking one enemy with Aura's Blaze. When someone other than Yoimiya hits that marked enemy, it'll trigger another AoE pyro explosion. I mean, if I'm gonna be honest, Yoimiya is a little weaker than Hu Tao and Zhang Ning, especially in AoE situations, but as a single target pyro DPS, she's actually pretty good. But now we ask the question, do I recommend you pull on her? And if I'm gonna be honest, probably not. As a pyro DPS, she is good, but has a lot of issues and scenarios where she isn't that good. Because of all this, I'm gonna be putting her in A tier because of her decent solo pyro damage and really a good single target DPS, but again, nowadays we rarely have single target scenarios. Well, that's about it. Let me know if you think these ratings are wrong or something. I mean, I said this in the beginning of the video, but this is just a personal rating that I made for myself and doesn't mean they're bad or anything. Anyways, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. I try to upload every Saturday, so make sure to sub. It really helps out the channel and makes me feel really good because there's this little 4-digit number that goes up. Also, again, like I said in the beginning of the video, I did make a Discord and will probably be chilling there a lot of the time, so if you're interested, the link is going to be in the description. Okay, I'm going to end the video now because my throat is killing me, so thanks for watching and yeah, goodbye.